Thank you all, and thank you, Todd and Linda, for inviting me to be here today to talk about transcranial magnetic stimulation. It's a mouthful. Before I do that, though, I'd like to just make this disclosure statement that I have no financial ties to any TMS device manufacturer, of which there are now 4, which you can see on the screen there. The only connection I have to NeuroStar TMS Therapy, which is the therapy I used, is that their device has saved my life. TMS has played a miraculous role, not only saving my life, but the lives of well over 23,000 people suffering with major depressive disorder in this country and now internationally. My decision to try TMS was not with what I call the FUD factor: fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But as is the case with all new technologies, that is, trusting it would work, trusting it was a bona fide, proven, safe treatment, this was something that we've all had to deal with, only on different levels. You as scientists, researchers, supporters of the technology, and we're expecting a positive outcome. Myself as a patient whose life depended on it and had given up on life altogether. But let me share with you my story that in retrospect seems implausible, yet it's frighteningly true. Despite the ever-nagging sadness that underscored even the happiest days of my life, I've managed to pull off a career, as Todd mentioned, as a senior level partner in several of the largest New York City advertising agencies. I have a healthy 39-year marriage, and I've raised 2 amazing children, and that's all the good news. Here's the bad news. With what appeared to be a perfect life, no one could have been more surprised than I was to end up in a hospital emergency room in New York City in February of 2009 due to a self-inflicted drug overdose. Although I took antidepressants back in the 1990s when I was first diagnosed with what was then called clinical depression, after many years and unbeknownst to me, the medication stopped working. It was utterly inconceivable that someone who had as much going for her as I had should want to die. But that's because severe depression eclipsed any rational thought. After my suicide attempt, I tried several drugs for several months and nothing helped. I actually felt worse than when I'd started. Trying to find the pill or the combination of pills that would work. Either they were flat out ineffective or the side effects were just unbearable. I felt scared and I felt frustrated and actually I felt angry. My motto up until that time had been to suck it up and just proceed. A wise old woman told me that. This famous actress, June Havoc. I don't know if you've probably never heard of her, but she said, "Martha, just proceed." I had a masterful game face also that I relied on, and I think my successful career was proof of how successful that game face it was. But unfortunately, my game face faded as my depression increased. I lived in a world where there was no escape from the daily worry of self-harm and persistent sadness. I lived in a world where I had to manufacture a false smile when I could just burst into tears, pretending to be happy so I wouldn't worry my family and friends who knew of my depression but they were helpless to do anything about it. I lived in a world where I felt an ever-present guilt that I simply didn't have the faculties to embrace their love because my brain refused to operate in a way that made it possible. Then a miracle happened. I discovered, or actually my sister Maria discovered, a magazine ad for transcranial magnetic stimulation with the headline, "Treat Depression Without Medication." I made an appointment with a psychiatrist to learn more and to see if I was a candidate for the treatment, and the verdict was yes. She explained to me that the treatment is not a quick fix, that it would take a commitment on my part to show up every day for 6 weeks. We're actually 5 days a week for 6 weeks, and the reason is because TMS is a cumulative process. The MRI strength pulses that target the left prefrontal cortex of the brain penetrate only about 2.5 centimeters through the scalp, and it's based on Faraday's law, which is kind of technical, but in the meantime, the magnetic contact with the neurons wake up those neurons that then start talking to each other, and then cumulatively over a period of 6 weeks, they go deeper and deeper into the brain, and eventually that part of the brain is where mood is determined, and it gives you relief. I was told it would take 15 to 20 sessions before I would feel any effect. She was encouraging, and she assured me that, in fact, this was a safe treatment, and I went ahead and went through with it. Initially, I was cautious. It was a new procedure, but I had done some layperson research, although there was nothing available for me as a layperson. There was a lot available for brainiac doctors, but my brain doesn't work like a brainiac doctor. I'm just a gal who, goes to New York and works in advertising. But I felt reassured because it was TMS. The TMS was FDA cleared in the fall of 2008. So I thought, okay, and this was now 2 years later, or it was 18 months later. So I thought, oh, okay, this if the FDA says it's okay, I guess it's okay. And the bottom line is, I had to say to myself, what have I got to lose? I was so blue, I was so down. I'm often asked, what does TMS feel like? I was pleasantly surprised to discover how uncomplicated TMS treatments are. I relax in a comfortable spa-like chair. I put on a flat screen TV or music if I like it. The magnetic pulsing taps for 4 seconds, and then rests for 26 seconds, on and off, for a total of 3,000 pulses, ergo the title of the book. It's very easy. But the best part of it is, for me and for many, and for most people, there are no side effects. There's no headache, no tummy upset. I didn't feel nauseous or dizzy or disoriented when I left my appointment. I could drive myself back and forth. I was telling somebody earlier, the only bad side effect is that it gives you a bad hair day, because this thing presses against your head. If you have a cute hairstyle, this thing it's shaped like this, and the coil is in there, and it's on an arm, and it's attached to a computer, and it presses against your head, and when you leave, your hairstyle is gone. But that's it. There are no sedatives, no anesthesia. You don't feel sleepy. It couldn't be easier, and it's quick. I mean, it takes longer to get a mani-pedi than it does to do one of these treatments. You're in and out in 45 minutes if everybody's running on time. The only thing I had to get used to, though, was this intense tapping. It's a sensation that feels like an imaginary angry woodpecker, or if you've got brothers that would give you a noogie, it feels like a noogie. It's intense, and it lasts for only 4 seconds. But there's a little bling that goes on in the computer that warns you, oh, it's going to, after 26 seconds, it's going to start again, and you sort of. Now, at first, I was so hypersensitive to everything because of the depression that even the slightest touch was troublesome for me. So I know that it hurt more than it normally would have had I not been so depressed. But with that said, I took an over-the-counter analgesic, a couple of Tylenols, got in my car, drove to my appointment. By the time I got there, it was in my system. And also, my TMS coordinator, I found this out because she saw me in tears when I was sitting in the chair with this. They can adjust the coil. They can make it a little higher, so it's a little more comfortable spot on your head. The area that is covered is about the size of a quarter. It's just very specific and targets the 3.5 centimeters forward from your motor strip in your brain. There's nothing to it. Admittedly, though, I have to say I did find myself struggling with that FUD factor I mentioned earlier, that fear, uncertainty, and doubt, because I kept wondering, how can this simple tapping on my head take all this misery away? I mean, every morning you take a pill, you see it, water goes in your system, it's very tangible, and it's going into your bloodstream, and hopefully it will do the trick. TMS is far more discreet. It's almost mysterious. To me, in the beginning, I had a hard time wrapping my head, no pun intended, around this idea of a magnetic pulse doing better than a pill. And that was a hurdle that I had to cross. But it's, you know, the fact that it's based on invisible magnetic pulses, you know, it does not take away from the fact that science proves that it works. Which brings me to another question I'm often asked. Does TMS really work? My TMS clinic, the Institute of Living at Hartford Hospital in Hartford, Connecticut, used the Hamilton Depression Rating Scales for my treatment. I started at 27. The higher the number, the worse you are. 30, I think, is the highest. I went in at 25, and then I even got worse. I was at 27 in May. I started May 3rd for my treatments in 2010. And as you can see, I went down to 0. So, but even when I started feeling better, I still couldn't believe that I actually came out of this horrible depressed state. And at some point, I guess I must have maybe said this to my treater, and she said, well, let me show you your HAM-D scores. And she pulled this up, and when I saw it in black and white, I went, oh my goodness, this is true. You know, this is not a lie. So my mother used to say the proof is in the pudding. And here's another scary slide. This was me, a picture of me just 2 days before I started TMS. I was at my computer. A friend of mine said I should do I couldn't write, I couldn't focus because of the depression. She said, well, why don't you just do a video of yourself, a video journal? So I started it just before my first treatment. And 2 years later, I'm here. I can't believe I allowed my vanity to put that picture up there, but I did. People also want to know, you know, about efficacy. I'll get emails from people. And I've got some just little stats here. In 2013, there was a 12-month study with 267 patients. 68% of those patients responded. That means they felt better. 45% went into full remission from their depression. And then in 2014, a year later, they did another 12-month study of 800 patients, which was a much better population. And in that case, 1 in 2 patients had significant improvement, and 1 in 3 patients became symptom-free. I think we'll get rid of this picture. Oh, wait a minute, what's the next one? Oh, all right, we'll leave it up there for now. Another question I get from prospective patients is, how do you know TMS was working? Well, somewhere around my 20th session, let me remind you that my treater told me in the very beginning, this is not a quick fix, this requires patience. I woke up one morning without that disgusting ugh feeling. It's that feeling that's 1,000 times worse than, oh, it's Monday morning and I got to go to that job with that boss feeling. I call this emotional nausea. It feels like, but it's in your emotions, not in your tummy. There was a feeling of lightness that came over me. I opened my eyes, I looked around the room. The light in the room looked different, actually. Then I noticed that when I was driving back and forth to my treatments, that the music I listened to in the car started to be more upbeat. And I actually one day was driving down the interstate and I found myself listening to Hello Dolly, which is a Broadway show, singing Hello Dolly. So I said, this must be working. You know, I also began reaching out to friends again and to answering phone calls. And when someone will say, well, do you want to go to a movie? I was able to say, yeah, let's go to a movie. It was all in the little things. That morning that I had the lift, I call it the lift, there There was no marching band that came through my bedroom, with horns and drums and things. There were no angels with the heavens opening up singing hallelujah. It was very subtle, but it was unmistakable. That's the only way I can describe it. Subtle but unmistakable. And when I talk to patients now, I remind them, look for the little things. Look for the little things. Those are the things that are going to give you a hint that TMS is starting to awaken your brain for you. My energy level increased, and overall, I just felt wonderfully, just very peacefully. Like life is manageable. It's going to be okay. It was that sense of it's going to be okay, as opposed to I wish I was dead and why do I have to be here? That was the shift. Another benefit of my own TMS experience is the making lemonade out of lemons factor. What I've come to realize 5 years later is this, this life-threatening suicide experience occurred for a few very good reasons. And I know that that's hard to understand, how could there be a good reason for trying to kill yourself? But I had to search deep in my soul, and I came up with these things, which I'll read to you. I had no idea how ill I had become as a result of decades of a stressful, high-powered job, and that there's an actual diagnosis for my condition, which is treatment-resistant depression. I was convinced that happy pill I took every morning, that pink little antidepressant, was the answer, and that it never occurred to me that it wasn't working. Instead, I considered myself the most ungrateful wretch on the planet. I had a great husband, great kids, great job. What more could a girl ask for? And here I was, wishing I was dead and sad. So for me, I turned in on myself, and this is not uncommon with people with depression, especially when it goes undiagnosed. I was unconsciously consuming way too much alcohol as a means of self-medicating, because unbeknownst to me, that antidepressant wasn't alleviating my pain. I've been told by my therapist that this is known as secondary alcoholism. I was a classic case. Because I had what appeared to be everything by most people's standards, my pervasive, bottomless sadness made me wonder, what the heck do I have to feel depressed about? So I made that erroneous assumption that I was the most ungrateful wretch, and I turned on myself as judge, jury, and executioner with my suicide attempt. According to Eckhart Tolle in his work, The Power of Now, what you need will show up the moment you need it, not a moment before nor a moment after. My suicide attempt was needed to show me that I was indeed very ill with a chronic disease that had gone undiagnosed and undetected and untreated. It showed up when I needed it because I had become incapable of recognizing myself. It was, ironically, my lifesaver. My crisis proved to me that I had to change my lifestyle and find a treatment that would help me if I was going to be able to just proceed. Major depressive disorder is a chronic physical illness, something I will always need to manage. Fortunately, I found a therapy that will allow me to live with my illness and enjoy a quality of life I hadn't known before. TMS is not a silver bullet, and there's no free pass that comes with it. It's just another device, another tool in the doctor's toolkit to treat depression. It's up to me to do my part by following these healthy guidelines. I do not drink alcohol. It's a depressant. Why would I drink something that is going to work against the very treatment that's saving my life? I eat nutritious meals that include a balance of protein, complex carbohydrates, fruits, and vegetables, and I try to avoid fat, sort of. Every day, I take a multiple vitamin D, the amino acids, omega-3, and I don't take any antidepressants medication because I do once a month maintenance for TMS now, which I may talk about later. I get a good night's sleep, usually 7 to 8 hours. Before I doze off, I consciously try to ponder something positive to avoid ruminating over negative thoughts that will allow me to go down the little hole there and not get a good night's sleep. I walk my rescue dog, Josie, every day. We rescued a dog, my family did, to get me out of bed in the morning because I was sleeping 14, 16 hours a day. And they said, well, if we get her a dog, she's got to get up and walk the darn thing. So that's where Josie comes into the picture. I don't walk her as much as I should. I should get more exercise than I do, but that's on my improvement list. I avoid unnecessary stressful situations because stress exacerbates depression and increases cortisol levels, which is why I'm reading a lot from this script and have not put myself under the pressure of memorizing every word of it. So that's one of my tactics. I also meditate. I do try to meditate at least like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'll take a break and meditate, and 20 minutes, half an hour, it's no big deal. I don't have to go into any kind of trance. I just put my headset on, and I do guided meditation. I'm not good enough to do the one where there's some people who can just send themselves into the trance by themselves. I needed the guided meditation CDs. They're great. I try to keep negative and unsupportive people at arm's length. They can be just as toxic and harmful to my well-being as alcohol and stressful situations. I mean, let's face it. You got a negative person, and you're like this. You're not gonna be, singing "Hello, Dolly." So, I make a conscious effort to engage in interpersonal activities because I find that being with people and with helping others, I am ultimately helping myself. It's my do good to feel good strategy. I stay vigilant about my symptoms to avoid a relapse. By the way, I have had a relapse, and within 10 sessions of TMS, it pulled me back out again. The relapse was pretty serious, actually. I didn't even think TMS, it was so bad I thought, this isn't gonna work for a second time, and my doctor said, no, it'll work. You just have to, if it worked for you the first time, your chances are it will work for you again, even though I'm sitting there in a puddle in her office thinking, I'm never gonna. Well, but she did say something to me that was very wise. She said, your depression and you can come out of this depression, but TMS will not take your problems away. You'll still have your problems. They will be there. She said, but you will perceive them and handle them differently because of TMS and your coming out of the depression. And she was absolutely right. Instead of being crying and upset about this particular situation, I got mad and I did something about it. So the TMS got me going again. So I am relieved and thankful there's an effective non-drug treatment that's applied directly to my brain, and it doesn't affect any of my other organs as a medication would. Not only have I recaptured my life, I've actually gained more than I had to begin with. I feel more real and clearer now than I ever have before. And most important, I have really found a newfound value for my life. It is worth living. But this isn't just about Martha Rhodes. Because of my own illness, I've discovered that over 1/3 of people with major depressive disorder will not will not respond to antidepressant medications. To these people, I've written the following in the introduction to my book. This to me is the most important part of my book, actually. Not my story, but this message. I believe there is a time and place in almost every person's life when their spirit must decide whether to go on with life or not. This decision isn't necessarily a conscious one, as in the aha moment, nor is it hidden in a dream or revealed in a gypsy's tea leaves. It can happen in a heartbeat or over the course of many years. It is simply part of the human condition when life serves up enough challenges that the spirit either becomes too tired, too confused, too frustrated, or hopeless to sort through another day, another month, or another year of living. For some, the idea of ending one's life is absolutely out of the question, religious heresy, philosophically abhorrent. They seek prayer and counseling for salvation and answers. They get busy, pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and move along their life's path, hoping that tomorrow will be better. And it usually is for them. For others, wanting to end it all is a dark inner voice that constantly provokes the listener into a battle between life and death, a struggle tied to curiosity, hopelessness, and despair. They too may seek prayer and counseling, but to no avail. They too may seek prayer and counseling, but to no avail, but these are the stricken ones. The people who have been dealt a lousy hand because their brains have been either wired differently or their bodies refuse to provide their brains with the organic chemicals needed to keep them emotionally and mentally balanced. Living with depression requires constant vigilance and self-care in order to survive it and silence that inner voice that insidiously picks away at a person's will to live. There are several options available to patients to handle their mental illness: psychotropic medications, talk therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, electroconvulsive therapy, deep brain stimulation, and now transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS. But they are all treatments that require a commitment by the patient to do his or her part. There is no get-out-of-jail-free card with any of them. It is the patient who must decide to claim ownership of his or her chronic illness and adhere to a lifestyle that enhances whatever treatment is working for him or her, as well as sticking to whatever regimen the doctors have prescribed. I am not a therapist. Nor am I someone who has a scientific background. I am one of the stricken, an ostensibly okay kind of gal whose brain goes on the fritz every now and then when I don't take care of myself physically, psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually. I am constantly looking over my psychological shoulder, keeping a watchful eye out for my depression demon, who will sometimes tap on it and whisper, "I'm back." Now I'm happy to say I at least have the awareness that this is lurking and always will be. I'm even happier, relieved to know that TMS will rescue me from the depths of despair that I experienced several years ago when I fell prey to depression's ultimate goal, suicide. With that said, it's incumbent on those of us who are stricken to own our illness and find the treatment that will allow us a quality of life that others enjoy. The main thing is we must find the therapy that works for us and do our part to stay healthy. No one can do this for us. Andrew Solomon, author and Columbia University psychology professor, he delivered this following quote I'm going to put up at a neuroscience symposium I went to at Yale University that sums up my expectations for overcoming depression and eloquently describes the reality of living with this chronic illness. The opposite of depression is not happiness, it's vitality of life. Vitality of life. My goal for treating my depression isn't necessarily to achieve happiness, because life circumstances will present days that are anything but happy. My end game is to reclaim my spirit for living and enjoy an appreciation for life that depression has robbed from me in the past and will continue to steal if I don't take care of myself. In the beginning of my TMS treatments, it felt like I was climbing a mountain, but I allowed myself the luxury of envisioning the possibility of a hopeful future, even when I was unable to believe it at first. But entertaining just the possibility that I could feel better got me to the hope. And it's the hopefulness that's become my trusted ally in living a life filled with vitality. As you sit here listening to my personal experience, TMS therapy has the potential to save the lives of millions of depressed and hopeless people who might otherwise give up as I did. Now, as a patient advocate, every week I get emails and letters and phone calls from TMS clinicians, patients whose stories are very similar or nearly identical to mine. Some who wish TMS had been available before their wife, parent, child committed suicide. Others who are grateful TMS prevented such a tragedy. I hear from spouses whose marriages teetered on collapse because of depression, but thanks to TMS have mercifully been saved. These letters always bring tears to my eyes and immeasurable hope to my heart. And because of that, I hope you realize how enormous your role has been and continues to be in giving those of us who cannot respond to traditional antidepressant medications an alternative, a highly effective means for surviving our depression. It is a chronic physical illness and something too many of us will always need to manage. I'd like to close with an excerpt from a Robert Frost poem, The Road Not Taken, the words I've come to fully embrace since my success with TMS. It may be a little trite because this is a very popular poem, but I have to tell you, it says it for me. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for making a difference. Does anyone have any questions? It's a series of 21 questions, same questions every week. It has to do with appetite, sexual drive, sleep, just daily life stuff, and you answer the question, and then they put in, the treater will put the answers in, and then it goes into, I think it goes into a computer with algorithms, and they weigh them, and then they come up with those scores. I'll put that slide back up. I mean, I was floored when I saw this. Now there are over 600 TMS centers in this country. There are 3 being opened up in Japan. One is already currently 65 TMS chairs and treaters in there. It is now being offered in the UK, South America, Asia, India, throughout Europe. There are different devices that are used in different places, but Neuronetics was the first, and that was why I'm so grateful to them. The treatment is, depending on where you live, it's anywhere between $8,000 and $12,000. Now, that's a big chunk of change. But when I did the numbers for my hospitalization and the medications, the doctor visit to get the medication, the pharmacy visit to pick up the expensive medication, I did those numbers, and it was more than double of what the initial treatment would cost. As far as insurance goes, when I did this, insurance wouldn't cover it. They called it investigational experimental. But fortunately, I had a psychiatrist who did me a huge favor. When I went to him, just so angry because I'm on my 4th medication, it's not working, I don't understand it, and my personality changed. I mean, the side effects of these medications did a number on me, to the point where I couldn't drive a car and I couldn't go to the grocery store alone because I was so on the edge with tears or with anger. They were both there for me. But when I expressed my frustration, I don't know why you're so angry. We have to try different things. This is not an art. This is not a science. This is an art. This is not a science. This is an art. I went, oh, okay. And I got out to my car and I went, wait a minute, this is not a science. I thought I was dealing with a scientist. I was dealing with a doctor. These medications are science, aren't they? So that was when, it was right around that same time that in TMS, my sister found this ad in the thing, and I went, well, okay, so when I got denied not once, but twice by my insurance company, I shot back. I don't know, somehow I got to say, you know what, they need to cover this because those pills aren't working, and they're telling me that that's what I need to do, and I've been there, done that. So I wrote these letters, and it wasn't easy, but I put my thoughts together, and I remembered this doctor's quote, this doctor's comment. This is not a science, this is an art. Well, we have to try different things. Well, isn't trying different things scientific, experimental and investigational? I thought, well, that's what we're doing here with, the same thing with the medications that you're telling me I can't do with TMS. So fortunately in Connecticut, the insurance laws require that you your case has to be sent to a third-party panel, unbiased, whatever. I don't know if that's true, if they're really unbiased, but anyway, mine was the first case in Connecticut to be reversed for TMS. And since that time, and I'm not patting myself on the back, I'm patting Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield on the back, since that time they have covered TMS for, and this was 2010, they were covering it for patients. Now, with that said, there was still 2 years where there was this no man's land of insurance throughout this country. And fortunately today, every state in this country, in the United States, has at least one insurance carrier that will cover TMS. And in 31 states, Medicare covers it. So, and it's changed. I mean, I've had to change it in the book so many times. I have the states listed. I had to keep reprinting because more and more insurance companies are coming on board. It is still case by case. You have to qualify for it. You have to have failed at least one medication for the proper dose and duration in the current episode of depression. That's what they require. But your doctor supports that. My talk therapist wrote a letter. I wrote letters. I provided scientific evidence that it worked, and so now the insurance is no longer such an obstacle. I'm not saying it's a shoo-in, but it is much easier than it was 5 years ago. So, good question. My family knew nothing. They knew nothing. They knew this, like I said before, I would have dumped me 39, years ago with my husband. They knew that I was often moody. They knew that I was sometimes unable to get out of bed. They knew these things, but nobody connected the dots. And when I was taking, my husband knew that I was taking an antidepressant, so he knew that I had a diagnosis of it, but nobody knew that I was not metabolizing, that those medications weren't working. And I hid it because I had a big job. I had a family to support. I had my pride. I had my stick-to-itiveness, just proceed, game face mask that I was very attached to. So I just drank. I just kept drinking to cover, the less the medication worked, the more I drank. I created the perfect storm, and that's what brought it to a head with the suicide attempt. I don't know that there's ever a bottom to it. I think it's a combination of things. There is a genetic component to it. I have family members who have suffered with depression, never talked about, but I can tell you looking back on it, they were depressed. There's the stress level is a component, and the cortisol levels. And I had some unfortunate and traumatic childhood sexual abuse issues that contributed to the PTSD epigenetics of my brain. I think that predisposed me to depression. They often say children who are abused, their brains, this thing called epigenetics, your brain rewires itself, and many times these people end up in very compromised, dangerous situations as adults, and I guess I qualify. But anyway, I don't have an answer to your question. I don't know what the bottom is. I just know that I have to keep track of my symptoms. I don't care about the bottom. I don't care about knowing why. Now I just care about knowing when. I need to know when I'm starting to go down. And my symptoms, it took me a few years to figure this out, my symptoms are I get agitated, like really short fuse, and I get weepy. I can be watching the television and I'll just have, all of a sudden I realize I'm just crying. It just, and it happens at the same time. I could cry or I could go off the handle at any moment, and it's like a pulling feeling here. That's a big symptom. And the other one is I ruminate about dead people who have died. I start thinking about them and they're in my head, and so then I know, oops, I better get up to Hartford. I better get a maintenance. And now, I used to go, the first year with maintenance, I would go, I finished in June, end of June. The holidays were coming, Thanksgiving and Christmas, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, maybe I better go up and make sure this is really going to stick, that I don't go get depressed over the holidays. So I went for one booster treatment around Thanksgiving and another one around Christmas. And then maybe after the long cold winter up in Connecticut, I went maybe March, April, somewhere in there, because it was, but that was it for the first year. The second year I went for maybe 4 booster treatments over the 12-month period. I did have a relapse in the end of 2012 that took me down. I went for 10 consecutive treatments, and by number 6 I felt lightness again. And by the way, even with maintenance, I'll leave the TMS center, but I don't walk out, happy as a clam at high tide. I walk out and I get in my car and I drive home, and if it's a Friday afternoon, by Sunday afternoon I'm feeling better. It takes usually 24 to 36 hours for that weepiness and stuff to lift. But I know, I keep doing it and it keeps working, so this is my go-to treatment. But if this didn't work for me, I would have to find something else. I would have to find the thing, and there are so many now that are available that as my tool for managing this chronic illness. I can't just let it, I can't ignore it, and that's the thing that unfortunately a lot of people do ignore, because there is such a stigma attached to it, and it is such a difficult illness to diagnose, and oftentimes there's comorbidity with depression and anxiety, which by the way I have. So they treat me on the right side of my head for anxiety. When I go for my treatments now, it's called bilateral. This is they're expanding TMS and for other illnesses as well. Stroke victims, anxiety, PTSD. There's several that they're doing bipolar, they're doing clinical trials for. So it's all good news. I mean, TMS it's here to stay. So it's just, people got to remember those 3 letters. T, give me a T, Yes, my only book, yes, yeah. The only thing I ever wrote were business letters and stuff for advertising, but my therapist said, well, actually, when I started to feel better, I kept saying, well, people need to know about this. When people would say, Martha, you're looking great, what did you do? I'd say, TMS, what? So I said, well, maybe somebody needs to know about this. My therapist said, well, why don't you write an article for the New York Times? This little article ended up being this book, and now there are over 5,000 copies throughout. It's on an ebook and it's a paperback, and it's, I have to say it was a little scary writing it, because I was disclosing a very personal story, but I got over it. I get over it because I'm getting so many emails and letters from people who are now benefiting from this because they have heard about TMS. I went into St. Vincent's emergency room, woke up a couple days later from the 28 Xanax and the 3 things of vodka, and they kept me in the medical floor just to make sure I was going to live. And I thought I was going home. After that, I thought, okay, I'm wide awake, I'm good to go. And they said, you're not going anywhere. And it was like, what? You're going to another floor. And I thought, oh, okay. Still don't get it. Another floor was code for psych ward, but I had never been in any of the situations. So we went in through my daughter was with me, we went in through the door, it slammed shut, it locked. I sat there, and all of a sudden I'm hearing all this screaming and this, you know, I don't know if any of you have ever been in a psych ward, but I highly discourage you from ever putting yourself in a position to be in a psych ward. They do the best they can. They have a lot to contend with, but the truth of the matter is it's a holding pen just to stabilize people. And I had to get out. I mean, I was fortunate that I was transferred to another hospital closer to my home in Connecticut, and that worked out pretty well. But yeah, the Rice 2 it's called, Rice 2. Yeah, it was a memorable experience that I was a bit traumatized by, actually. I will tell you, it's the first line of the book. It was the easiest decision I ever made. And I really mean that. There's nothing, committing suicide is not the drama, oh, shall I do it, the kids, the blah, 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 am I gonna? None of that. It's a very peaceful, very quiet, very personal moment where you just go, oh, that's what's next. Okay, fine. Done. It's very, very simple, and that's why it's so dangerous, because it's so simple. People who talk about committing suicide, they're not there yet. When you get there, it's like falling off a log, nothing to it. So pay attention, and if you have loved ones who are, you know, if you worry about them, just pay attention, because, and I'm not trying to be an alarmist here as much as I am saying, you know, be damned with the pride and the humility and the stigma. Get to it. This is a physical illness. If you had a loved one with a tumor, you wouldn't say, well, wait till next year, go in the summertime when you got a vacation. No, you would say, no, get to the doctor, handle this thing. If they were broken off with a rash or, you know, whatever, you would say, no, you must take care of yourself. Well, do that with mental illness. I wish they wouldn't call it, I wouldn't call it mental illness. It's brain illness. The brain is not doing its job. The brain is an organ. It's not performing its job. It's ill. It's diseased. That's what mental illness really is. The brain being diseased and not doing its job. That's a tough one. There's literature out there to help family members get patients to mental health care. I think it's love. I think if you can just express how much you love that person, and that you care about them, and that they matter, and that their lives are important, even because when you're depressed you feel like your life is not important, and that if you disappeared everyone's life would be better. That's where the mind goes. That's where my mind went. Everyone will be a lot better off because I won't be such a load on them anymore. And having someone really eye to eye, toe to toe say, look, you are loved, you are, and they may not be able to hear it, but if you just keep standing by that person with that message of love and support, and forget, you know, help them understand that there is no stigma, help them understand that they are ill, they're physically ill. Equate it to if you had diabetes, my loved one, you were fainting because you didn't have enough insulin. You'd let me take you to the doctor and get you insulin, wouldn't you? Yeah? Come on, let's go get you some help for your brain that's not working. That's the kind of conversation I would have. Not easy though, believe me. Well, if they're Baker Act, they're put into a psychiatric ward or hospital, and the chances of the doctors in that hospital saying, yeah, put her in TMS are not that great, because TMS is still on the periphery. It's not the go-to treatment, unfortunately. It will get there because there are going to be enough friends, family, patients that are saying, this is what I want to do. I don't want to suffer the side effects of these medications, A. B, the ones that I'm suffering the side effects with aren't even working. And I don't want to do ECT because I don't want to do the anesthesia or lose memory. I mean, there's side effects with that too, although I do not disparage ECT because it is another neurostimulation modality that I think is worthwhile, but it's for very extreme cases of psychosis, and I think anyway, I'm not a healthcare professional, so don't don't quote me on this, but my observation is that if there's, I mean, I had a patient call me, it was actually a friend's stepdaughter, and this child was really in trouble. She was in her 20s, and but she was having psychotic breaks about her harming her mother, and I mean, she wanted to know about TMS, and I told her all about it, but I also called the hospital, and I talked to my friend, and I said she needs to be put into a guarded, hospitalized situation. And to myself, I said, and she'll be doing ECT, and sure enough, you know, she ended up with it, and she did well. So, you know, but TMS, I wouldn't say is for severe cases. I think it's, although I was pretty severe now that I think about it, but I wasn't going to harm myself. I mean, I knew that. I mean, I had already been there, done that harming myself thing. But when I did the HAMDs, they would ask, one of the questions was, well, are you going to harm yourself, or you know, something about your health, my health. And I said, well, no, but if you told me I had cancer, I would leave the office and I would go home. I wouldn't do anything. That was sort of where I was. If I got delivered with a fatal illness, I wouldn't have sought, before I did TMS, I wouldn't have sought help. I would have just given up. I don't know. I took 28 Xanax. And the reason I know there were 28 is because my doctor, when she couldn't give me any, she couldn't up the whatever the Paxil anymore, she said, well, I went to a GP. I didn't go to a psychiatrist because I didn't know that psychiatrists do what they do. And I thought my GP was giving me these pills and they were fine. But she said, but why don't you take this? She said, this is Xanax. It's a little dangerous. Don't take it all the time. You know, so I said, okay. So I took it once or twice just to see what it felt like. But because she had said it's a dangerous drug, you can get hooked on it or something, I steered away from it. So it was sitting there. I don't know if I was unconsciously saving it for a rainy day or not, but all I know is when I took that night, when I got back to that apartment after this business dinner I'd had, and I realized I'm done, I knew that bottle was there, and there were 28 pills in it because there's 30 pills to the prescription, and down they went. I don't know why I'm alive. Well, they say that I called my brother. It's a long story, but anyway, somehow they got me. They came, the New York fire department came in through the back door and got me to the hospital, and they must have pumped my stomach, I don't know, but anyway, I woke up a day, I think it was 2 days later, and I was in it. I was in the soup, as they say. And that's another miracle, because that was a brother that I didn't have a relationship with. I didn't have him even in my contacts in my phone. And somehow, I'm one of 7 children, and there's my sister Maria, Michael, my brother, that I didn't have the relationship with. I'm the Irish twin. We're 11 and a half months apart, me. And they say I called him, but I'm thinking, why would I call him? He was the one, I'm close to my sisters and my other 2 brothers, but I think because he had his demons. He had depression, he had alcoholism, he had drugs. He was a mess. And I figured, well, maybe he'll understand, but I don't know how I got his number because it wasn't in my phone, but somehow I may have written it down on a piece of paper. I don't know. The whole thing's a miracle. But then he put the alert out to my sister, who, he was way up in Connecticut, so he called my sister who lives in Yonkers, who's closer, and then the other sister knew where the apartment was, and they all kind of, this is one of the benefits of being one of 7 children, not one of the benefits when your mother's serving strawberry shortcake for dessert, because then you want, but being one of 7 when I tried to commit suicide was a great benefit, because the phone started working, and my sister showed up, and they called the 911, and they got me, so. It's a miracle. Yeah, I look at it as pretty much a miracle. And I am not proud of what I've done. I mean, there's a lot of guilt that goes along with this. There's a shame with it. I worry that I will worry them, but I also know that it was needed. I mean, when I said you get what you like Eckhart Tolle says, you get what you need for a reason, and the reason Again, I don't know what the bottom, where the bottom of my reason is either for being here, but I do know that I found this thing called TMS. I'm able to articulate about it. I'm grateful that you're sitting here with me, willing to hear about it. I'm grateful to Linda and Todd for inviting me to come here and share my experience. And I hope that I hope it spreads the word and helps someone, somewhere out there, who does not know where to turn or what to do. Are there any other questions?
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.